because they relate to something that precedes the use of these pronouns. When we use he, she, it, they, there is nothing often that precedes them. So often they are used as subjects. Here, however, they form complementary clauses. They form relative clauses. So there has to be some antecedent in order to locate the meaning of these words. In case of antecedent missing, the meaning of these words will not be clear, and therefore the purpose of adding meaning by using relative pronouns would not be fulfilled. So relative means something related to the preceding antecedent, and we will see shortly how these words would relate to the previous words. Look at these sentences, for example. I know the person who served us. I know the person who served us. Nimi, who served us, is my friend. Nimi, who served us, is my friend. Also, look at the use of comma, and we will discuss that in a short while. The engineer whose designs you admired is my friend. The engineer whose designs you admired is my friend. You can see that the words which are in red, who, whose, are relative pronouns, and they relate to something that precedes them. In the first sentence, I know the person who served us, and you can see that who means the person. Who means the person. So who adds to the meaning of the word person, and it rather tells you something more about the person. Similarly, in the second sentence, who, relative pronoun, tells you something more about the identity of Nimi. You are introducing Nimi as your friend. So it's an addition. In the third sentence, whose shows the possession, the designs, whose designs. So if I ask you, whose designs are we talking about? You will tell me your answer would be the engineer's designs. So whose connect the engineer and his designs. So here, in each of these sentences, the relative pronoun relates to the preceding word, which is often the main object of our talk or conversation. And so that's the meaning of relative pronouns. Look at some more sentences. I know the place which he talked about. I know the place which he talked about. You can see that some words are capitalized here. I know the place which he talked about. The place is capitalized, and which is a relative pronoun. And now you can tell me that which means the place. When you say which, you are adding something to the meaning of the word place. Which place are we talking about? The place that you know. I know the place which he talked about. It rained all night, which was good. Look at the second sentence. It rained all night, which was good. This is a special use of which is, of course, as a relative pronoun, but probably you will face this question. You would be wondering what which relates to, because there is nothing capitalized here, and probably there is no express object to which relates. But here the object is not stated. However, you can decipher that it rained all night is the fact that we are talking about. So which was good, what was good? If I ask you, you would tell me the fact that it rained all night. So we are talking about the event of all night raining, and that is what is good. So we are talking about the event which is not expressly an object in this sentence. So this is the special use of which. So which has two uses which you would like to remember. The third sentence is, do you know the man whom we see every day? Do you know the man whom we see every day? And once again you would see that man is capitalized. Do you know the man whom we see every day? And here it is whom, which is the object case. We will briefly discuss each of these relative pronouns and their characteristics so that you can easily remember when a particular connector is used or when a relative pronoun is used and in what sense, and where sometimes we have this confusion whether to use who or whom. And when we look at the characteristics, probably we will understand better. So these are just the examples, and then we will discuss them in detail. But before we move on to the details, let's talk about briefly the third set of our session today, and that's the relative adverbs. So basically we looked at so and therefore. That was the first set. The second set out of the 9 connectors that we are talking about today were relative pronouns, and the final set that we have made of 3 words as connectors is relative adverbs. They are called relative adverbs. Once again, they are relative, but they are adverbs. They are not pronouns, and that's how they differ from the previous words who, whom, which, and whose. So they are not pronouns, but they are adverbs. They are used as adverbs. But nevertheless, their attribute of being related to the words that precede in the sentence remain the same. So they are also relative adverbs, and so there isn't much difference in their use. One more thing we would like to remember before we move on to the details and sentences, and that's what we might like to call the proximity rule. Actually, there is a law of proximity, but for grammar we will call it a rule of proximity. If you look at this figure, you will see that most of us would group these shapes into 2 groups. The first, vertical group, and the second, horizontal group. So 6 figures in the vertical group and the 6 figures in the horizontal group, and that's because they are in proximity to one another and they form the group. Similarly, when we use relative pronouns, we must follow the rule of proximity. That is to say that we must use relative pronouns or relative adverbs as close to the antecedent as possible. That is, the word they add meaning to. Look at these 2 sentences. My brother is a doctor. My brother is a doctor. That's the first sentence. He lives with his wife. That's the second sentence. Now, if we have to connect these 2 sentences, we must take care that the meaning does not change when we connect these 2 sentences. For example, if we say, my brother is a doctor, he lives with his wife, and when we connect it, it would be something like this. My brother, who is a doctor, lives with his wife. My brother, who is a doctor, lives with his wife. Here, just as in the previous sentence, the brother remains a doctor, and we are using the relative pronoun who for the brother, because brother, as you can see, is capitalized to mean that it is the antecedent, and that is the word to which the relative pronoun refers to. My brother, who is a doctor, lives with his wife. So here the meaning does not change. However, if we fail to follow the rule of proximity, sentence might be like this. My brother lives with his wife, who is a doctor. And here, as you can see, because who follows his wife, and his wife is capitalized to show that who refers to his wife. And here the meaning changes, and therefore the sense suffers. Actually, if you look at the original sentences, the wife is not the doctor, but the brother is the doctor. But if you fail to follow the rule of proximity, when you connect the sentence might suffer and the sentence might become something else. So it is necessary to keep the connector as close to the word as possible. In most of the antecedents, you can put it right next to the word. For example, in the first sentence, you can see my brother, who is a doctor, who is immediately after the brother. But in some other sentences, there might be a word or two in between that you may not be able to avoid, but still you should keep it as close as possible. There are 2 uses of these relative pronouns and relative adverbs, they are referred to in different words, but you can call them identifying and adding use of relative pronouns. Identifying and adding use. Some grammar books would also tell you that they are the defining and non-defining use of relative adverbs. Defining use of an adverb, a relative pronoun or relative adverb, is when you use it to define the antecedent. We will look at some examples. For example, here, I know the person who served us. I know the person who served us. Here, the relative pronoun who is used to define or to identify the person. If I just say, I know the person, the meaning is not clear. But by using the clause that follows who, I am adding meaning. I know the person who served us. But in the second sentence, it is the adding use, that is, non-defining use. Nimish is not defined. Nimish, who is the object here in the sentence, is not defined by what follows after who. Nimish, who served us, is my friend. And you can also notice the use of comma. In non-defining or adding use, commas are typically used, while in the first sentence there are no commas are used. So the second use is the adding use, because Nimish is my friend, but there is some additional detail. Nimish, who served us. So Nimish served us is the fact that is additional. Even without that, I can say Nimish is my friend, and that would define Nimish. So that is non-defining use. But in the first sentence, it's not possible. I cannot say, I know the person served us. Okay. So the second sentence is non-defining use, while the first sentence is defining or identifying use of relative pronouns and adverbs. Look at these two sentences. There stood the building which was demolished last year. There stood the building which was demolished last year. The building which was demolished last year was new. In the second sentence, you can see that it is non-defining use, or rather the adding use of relative pronouns, by using which in the second sentence you are adding an extra detail about the building, while in the first sentence the building is defined by the clause, relative clause followed by which, relative clause that follows which. So that's the difference. However, did you notice something? The second statement should have used comma. As we discussed, the non-defining use should always use comma. So there should be a comma after the building and after last year. So there should be comma because it is the non-defining use. Now, let's look at some of the details of these relative pronouns one by one. The first relative pronoun that we have is for persons. Who is for persons. Who is the relative pronoun that is used for persons, that is for human beings. That is to say that it is not used for objects or inanimate objects. It is used with singular as well as with plural. So I can use who for an antecedent that is singular. For example, in the previous sentences we had Nimish, who is my friend, served us. Nimish, who served us, is my friend. So Nimish is singular and I used who with them. But I can also use with something like the people. The people who are here are all students. So the people, the word the people is plural, but I can still use who. So it is used with singular as well as with plural. It can replace a human reference. It can replace a human reference. That is to say that it can replace most probably the simple nouns, but even the names in the clauses. Look at this example. There is a man outside who wants to see you. There is a man outside who wants to see you. We are reading this statement already connected. But in case you had to separate two sentences from this statement, you will have there is a man outside and he wants to see you. There is a man outside and he wants to see you. As you can see on the screen, in the second independent sentence, he is in black. He is in black while the rest of the words are in red. Can you guess something? Yes, he is pronoun and who is relative pronoun. So when the sentence is connected, you can see there is a man outside who wants to see you. So who replaces he. As we discussed, it can replace a human reference. So he is the pronoun which was used in the independent sentence to mean the person. The same function is now taken over by the use of relative pronoun who. So there is a man outside who wants to see you. So when you connect sentences, you should be careful to remove repetitions. Repetitions should be removed. For example, you cannot keep he when you have relative pronoun who. And that is one of the common errors. We often connect sentences, there is a man outside who he wants to see you. Who he wants to see you. So the problem is that we have two pronouns. One is relative pronoun, that is who, and one is the simple pronoun he. And we should not have two pronouns because two pronouns do not make anything extra. So we should have only one pronoun, and when we want to connect sentences, we should have only the pronoun that acts as a connector, and that is the relative pronoun who. So he should be removed. So once again, when you prepare your checklist for what you should be doing when you connect sentences, one of the points on your checklist should be that you should be removing repetition, and you should be able to identify the pronoun that could be replaced by a connector relative pronoun word. Look at this statement. My sister, who lives in Mumbai, will be 30 next year. Once again, this statement is connected already. My sister, who lives in Mumbai, will be 30 next year. And if you separate these two sentences, it will be like, my sister lives in Mumbai, she will be 30 next year. Here, I have not marked anything in black. And can you see what is the pronoun? Which word is the pronoun that could be replaced with who? Yes,